So, I will call this meeting to order. Very sorry about the long delay, technical problems apparently, and we'll have finally solved them. So welcome to meeting number 52 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. As of March 2nd, the committee has received a request from 4 members of the committee to enter into a discussion on the extension of the clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-13, pursuant to Standing Order 1064. And with that, I give the floor to Mr. Beaulieu. Go ahead. Thank you. So under 1064, as we've seen, up until now, we have adopted 20 of the 71 clauses that we're studying, and there was only 1.5 meetings left. And now with the loss of time that we've had today, it's probably another meeting and a half or 2 that would be required. But clearly we don't have time to debate all of these clauses, whereas I think in 52 years it's the first time that there's going to be significant reform carried out to the Official Languages Act. So for Quebec, there's been a decline in French, and I think that's the case across the country. So I think this is really a feverish issue for the whole language issue. The government admitted that there has been a decline in French, and we have to act. We have to really have time to do things properly. So we consider that ideally we should have the proper amount of time to go through these clauses, and we'll see at least there's clause 54 that is extremely important, that deals with Bill 101 and federal businesses and the impact of the charter on them, the French charter. So we want at least to be able to get to that clause, number 54. So I've launched a discussion here. That was the goal of this meeting, but I think it is important for Quebec on the one hand, because Quebec shared their perspective on this in a document that was published 1.5 years ago, and they sent us their ideas on amendments in another document later. So not much has been integrated into Bill C-13. So there are references that are asymmetrical, like the Official Languages Act, as it is founded on the basis of minority language communities being categorized by province in the 1960s, where there was a significant mobilization in the only francophone state in North America. The Official Languages Act proclaimed that in Quebec, the federal government was going to support English. So we can't continue in that way. We have to change that, not only for Quebec, but for francophones outside of Quebec. I think for them, it's the future of French in the province of Quebec is important as well. It's the market for artists, the Acadian and Quebec communities. They're important suppliers of professors, teachers, and francophones as well, who move into different regions of the country. A point of order, sir? Just a moment, Mr. Beaulieu. There's a point of order. I understand that 1064 is but with all of the arguments that Mr. Beaulieu has presented, what does he want to achieve here? I'm having trouble understanding. Well, just one person at a time, please. I will retain your order. Go ahead, Mr. Beaulieu. Well, I'd like to know before answering. We've lost 1.5 hours, so what are you going to do about that? That's an important aspect of this. We have 1 meeting left and 1 hour. 1 hour. So now there's a meeting. Does 1.5 hours and an hour, and then we're going on to the extension after that. So, well, before going any further in the discussion, I'm going to give Ms. Latanzio the floor, just so that we can hear from her. Today was the 8th meeting that we were supposed to have, and we had accepted to extend it for another half meeting. So even despite what happened here today, we were taking off from an 8th meeting. Well, just a moment, please, a point of order, because I hadn't finished my point. Well, I have a point of order and another point of order, so Ms. Latanzio. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I heard what my colleague has said, but on the other hand, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you received it, but I didn't receive a motion from my colleague. So the question is the following. Does the clerk or someone have a motion concerning what Mr. Beaulieu is asking for today? Well, I was waiting to put the question to Mr. Beaulieu because I myself didn't receive one, neither did the clerk. I thought you might present it. Well, I do have a motion. In fact, I have more than one, but I wanted to start out by seeing what people's reactions were. If not, we can go to the motion. Well, it's because the ball's in your court right now. You've asked for this meeting and urgently to have this meeting on C13. So is there something more detailed or precise? Well, what I'm asking ideally is that if we could just continue until we get to the end of the amendments. I just wanted to see around the table what's possible. I wanted to propose some solution so that we can work well together and have the time to cover the majority of the amendments. Well, we're going to do all of the amendments. I'm not sure I understand. We're going to deal with all of the amendments. Well, we're going to deal with them, but without debate. At one point in time, that's what we were saying. So we have to have the opportunity to debate them. So perhaps I can give the floor to my colleague, and if need be, I'll table a motion. Point of order, please, Mr. Is this a 1064 motion or not? Well, that's what I was going to say. Mr. Beaulieu, tell us what you want, and then we can debate it, because it's a bit vague at the moment.
Parfait, M. Beaulieu. On va prendre quelques temps.
I'll send. Okay, we'll take a moment to receive the motion. Mr. Godin, is that okay? But do you want to wait? Well, I can perhaps fill the time, Mr. Chairman. No, but you'll see, Mr. Serré. Mr. Chairman, what I'm suggesting is that we wait to have Mr. Beaulieu's motion, and during that time to gain some time, I will take advantage of this interruption so that I can make my speech. Are you, on what? On 106. Well, it's Mr. Beaulieu at the moment, so. Mr. Beaulieu, I'm trying to be flexible, but we really need to have this.
Monsieur le Président. Oui,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify, because the motion we had passed was that we'd have 12 meetings, and then we accepted 8. And after the 8th meeting, then we were to discuss the fact that we might extend. That's what we had decided to do. So I don't understand why we're talking about 106 here today, because we had already approved. Well, I can't respond because I'm waiting for the motion. So I'm waiting. All right, I'll take a comment from Mr. Serré. I'll take it as a comment. Well, let's just take a moment and to read what has been proposed, and we'll come back in a few moments. The interpreters do not have the motion for the moment either.
Oui, nous suspendons quelques instants.
Resuming. So we'll read your motion that, in accordance with item 5 of the motion adopted on December 1st, 2022, the committee extend the duration of its clause-by-clause study of Bill C-13 by the number of meetings necessary to consider and debate any amendments that committee members wish to propose. Period. So, I had Mr. Leroux, I had Mr. Godin, and then we'll come back to you, Mr. Beaulieu, afterwards. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I wanted to mention earlier is that I think the steps that were taken was to emphasize the fact that we want to do our job well. This is a historic bill, and we need to do it properly for the next 25 years. So between the proposal that my colleague, Mr. Beaulieu, has made and 2 extra meetings, I think there's some margin for maneuver, and I think that we should be able to come to an agreement in the interest of official languages. So I'm going to wait until I present a sub-amendment. I'll wait and see what people are going to, how they're going to react. Thank you. Mr. Drouin first. Yeah, Mr. Drouin. Yeah, obviously the committee, and I want to remind the committee that if we had carried on with the study, it would have been finished a year ago, but that's another story. I'm curious because his motion says Bill C-13 by the number of meetings necessary. So is that in perpetuity, or can Mr. Beaulieu give us an idea of what to expect? Because the last time, I think we agreed unanimously on 8 meetings, and now it says the number of meetings necessary. But look, we could argue for hours and hours and hours and hours on one amendment, and we'll just never wind this up. So I'd like to know, I'd like some clarification, and I would be interested in hearing what Mr. Godin has to hear. He seems to be a reasonable person. I'd like to hear what his sub-amendment is as well. Thank you. Mr. Beaulieu? Well, I was saying to myself that we have a certain number of clauses, and some of them took a great deal of time because I think people didn't want to get to Clause 54 on the application of that particular one. But I withdrew several of our amendments. They were less important, so that we'd be able to pick up speed. And the goal is not to make this drag on and not have it adopted. I want it to be adopted, but we have to make some progress at some point in time. So if we set out a specific number of meetings, then I have the impression that some people will say that they'll drag out the debate. So because they don't want to get to Clause 54. Mr. Godin? Okay, so I thank you, Mr. Drouin, for telling me that I'm a good mediator. I've done this in the past, but there was good cooperation between the opposition parties and the party in power. So for my part, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to table a sub-amendment. And in terms of wording, I will just draft it with you. I want the intention behind it to be good, and I want to find the right wording. So our analysts might be able to help us, or the clerk, or our legislative clerk, whoever has the qualifications. So in accordance with our study on Bill C-13, an act to amend the Official Languages Act, and dictating the use of French under federal jurisdiction and bringing amendments to other acts, we would like to have an extension of 4 meetings. Moreover, the study of Clause 54 be stood to the end of this period of study, the clause by clause, and that it be reviewed with debate. Now, the wording of my motion, we want to be able to debate Section 54, which concerns the Charter. If I may, Mr. Godin, I'm not even talking about what's in the amendment, but you have to indicate for us if it's a sub-amendment. And if that's the case, how are you going to insert it into what's being proposed by Mr. Beaulieu? Because you're going to say that you want to adopt this amendment afterwards? Well, in terms of procedure, I'll withdraw it, and I will table my amendment, and you now have heard what it is. Well, I thank you for your understanding. Mr. Serré, go ahead. Well, the Conservative Party understands procedure very well. So playing games like this is really a joke that they're playing here. We have a motion on the floor here. A point of order, please, Mr. Chairman. And just a moment, please. The interpreter cannot interpret 7 people at the same time.
Monsieur Serré, Monsieur Godin, dirigez-vous.
Mr. Serré, Mr. Godin, please. I hear you, but I'd like to hear you when I've given you the floor. So for the moment, let's keep... Mr. Chairman, could we have some order here? That's what I'm trying to do here. That's what I'm trying to accomplish. So I can't get the strap out as we used to in the good old days, but a little respect, please, from everyone. There's a motion on the floor from Mr. Beaulieu. Let's limit the debate to that for the moment. Mr. Godin tells us that he is not prepared to table this sub-amendment for the moment. He'll do that later. So if we want to get anything done today, 5:30 will be upon us soon, and we have to adjourn at 5:30. So, Mr. Beaulieu, unless Mr. Godin, you have a point of order? Mr. Serré, please. One person at a time, please. Mr. Chairman, I'm asking for an apology from my colleague because he alleged something that we never did on this side, the Conservative Party of Canada. Thank you. I'm waiting for his apologies. Can we cool down, please, and resume as if nothing had gone on here? So we're on Mr. Beaulieu's motion. Well, you recall... that's another point of order, please. It was alleged that we had bad intentions. Mr. Serré said that, and I'm attacking him now. I want him to withdraw those words. I won't ask for an apology, but I ask him to withdraw that comment.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chairman.
Monsieur.
Oui, monsieur.
Yes, Mr. Serré. But Mr. Chairman, in order to make progress here, we want this to move forward. We want to do it as quickly as possible, and so I will withdraw my comments. Very much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Serré. So I'd like to give the floor back to Mr. Beaulieu now. Okay, the goal is to move forward, and I think I don't want to get involved in this game because that could go on for a long time. At the limit, I would be prepared to withdraw this amendment and move ahead with Mr. Godin's, but that would require unanimous consent. Is there unanimous consent for Mr. Godin to move forward with this? Nobody's against it? No. Oh, I'm sorry. Someone is against. Okay. So, sorry, we have to go back to your motion, Mr. Beaulieu. There isn't unanimous consent. It requires unanimous consent. Well, my colleague seems to be consulting someone in the back row there. That's not what I understood for Mr. Serré to say.
Oui, la procédure.
It's an issue of procedure, Mr. Serré. You understand procedure? Well, no, you understand it, but okay. Listen, Mr. Serré, Mr. Godin, but just a moment, please. The chair has the floor now. Mr. Serré, please. I think that the people listening to us, people who are in the room, should expect that parliamentarians will respect each other during the procedures that are unfolding here today. So the question that was asked, Mr. Beaulieu was saying that he was prepared to withdraw his amendment, and in order for him to do that, he needs unanimous consent. So is there unanimous consent that he withdraw that amendment? And before going any further, Mr. Drouin, you wanted to say something?
I simply want to call the vote. He asked for a meeting and he's withdrawing his motion now. Let's vote on the motion he wanted to table and then we can proceed. Okay, so there is not unanimous consent. We are dealing with Mr. Beaulieu's motion. Mr. Godin, I find this very strange. We're wasting some time. We want to withdraw it to move faster, but they're asking to put it to vote. That was my comment, and I'll let people be the judge of that. Thank you, but it's because we are seized with a 106 motion, and we need to deal with it accordingly. Can we vote? Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Monsieur Serré?
Contre.
Monsieur Drouin?
Contre.
Monsieur Iacono? Contre. Madame Kayabaga?
Contre.
Madame Latanzio? Monsieur Godin?
Contre, Madame la greffière.
Monsieur Généreux?
Contre.
Monsieur Gourde? Monsieur Lehoux? Monsieur Beaulieu? Madame Ashton?
Contre.
Donc, 10.
10 against, 1 for. The motion is rejected. Mr. Godin, the floor is yours. I would like to table an amendment. And once again, when it comes to the wording, Mr. Chair, it's not that I'm ill-intended, but I'm asking my colleagues for help for this wording, that in the study of Bill C-13, an act to amend the Official Languages Act to enact the use of French in federally regulated private businesses act and to make related amendments to other acts, that we add 4 additional sessions and that the study of Clause 54 be postponed to the end of the clause-by-clause study and that the study of this clause be done with debate before the end of that section.
Question par rapport à ça?
Are there any questions on that? Ms. Ashton, go ahead. First of all, I would like to say that I understand the need to add some time, but I'm very worried about what happened during this meeting. I had the proper equipment, the proper tools. My internet was working well, and for an unknown reason, I was being told that the meeting could not go ahead. I find this completely unacceptable. I'm also concerned that we've been wasting time. There were other technical issues, I believe, real technical issues, and I consider that we've wasted time during the first meetings because of some filibustering by various Liberal members who had their own specific agenda, and I did express concern because we were seized with a government bill, and a few government members of the committee seem to be against it. So I do understand that we need to add some time. I believe that if we add 4 meetings, that would be too much, because we would like to finish as soon as possible to be efficient. And if we add these 4 sessions, that would bring us to the end of March. There are 2 break weeks following that, and then we would come back at the end of April. And as we all know, there won't be enough time left to pass the bill. So we would agree to 2 additional meetings, but we believe that 4 meetings is too many. As an aside, 2 full meetings, not without technical difficulties, that's what I would ask for. Mr. Godin. Mr. Chair, I appreciate Ms. Ashton's comments, and I empathize with what she experienced. I know that it's not her fault. She complied with all the requirements. I'm trying to understand something, though, Mr. Chair. There's an 8th meeting that will be taking place on Friday morning. Then there's another 1-hour meeting that was already planned for, plus we just wasted around 90 minutes today. So that's another session plus 0.25 in terms of hours. I hear Ms. Ashton asking for 2 additional sessions. Is it 2 additional sessions on top of that or including that? That's my question. Ms. Ashton, can you clarify? To continue with, in the spirit of adding time, we already have Thursday's meeting on the agenda, so I would add 2 full meetings to that when we come back the week of March 20th. So 2 sessions, Tuesday and Thursday, or rather Tuesday and Friday. Mr. Godin. Mr. Chair, from what I understand, today, end of day, Friday is session number 8. Today is session number 8. So that's what I said earlier. Today, had it not been for technical issues, we were conducting the 8th meeting, and we had all agreed to extend for an hour next time, an extension to this meeting number 8 to take the technical issues into account. So we're already conducting the meeting number 8. To clarify, can you let us know from Friday how many sessions are left? Because today is over in Ms. Ashton's proposal there.
Si je comprends.
Non. Je suspends un instant.
I suspend 1 second. For debate. This is a regular meeting. Today's a regular meeting that will be extended by a half meeting on Friday. I did clarify that earlier today to make sure everyone understood. So today's meeting does count, but we know there have been technical issues. I have a point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Beaulieu. A 1064 meeting is an emergency meeting. It doesn't count as a clause-by-clause study meeting, does it? It is an addition to the regular meeting. Mr. Serré, I'm trying to understand. What is being proposed exactly? If we hold the 8th meeting on Friday, and then 2 additional sessions, as Ms. Ashton is suggesting. It would be 3 in total after today. Is that agreeable? That's what I'm trying to understand. Mr. Reyes. He's not here very often, so we want to hear from him. I was wondering whether I was allowed to intervene because I'm not an official member of the committee. I can? Thank you. I simply had a comment. A question was asked, Mr. Reyes. Mr. Reyes can intervene unless the committee doesn't want him to. He is not a regular member of the committee. We know that.
Allez-y, Monsieur Reyes.
Go ahead, Mr. Reyes. I have the consent of the committee for a brief intervention. I don't think I will have the opportunity to table my amendment. I simply wanted to say I've been listening to you, and I've been following most of the debates of this committee. First of all, I would like to thank you for all your work. We all understand the importance of this bill for Francophones all over the country, and I sincerely hope that you will find a solution, that you will find more time, and there are major amendments to linguistic clauses. I have one to introduce, but they are being asked by all Francophone organizations around the country. I urge you to debate them. I urge you to find a consensus. There's no partisanship here. Please extend for more than an hour and make sure you do your utmost for the Francophones and Anglophones in minority situation, and for that this bill to be satisfactory and be adopted in a duly manner at the House and the Senate. Thank you. How about we present a number of hours? That might be more helpful. Usually a session is 2 hours long, so 2 sessions would be 4 hours, and that's without taking technical issues into account. They can always arise, but could that rally people behind a proposal? We only have 6 minutes. Mr. Godin, if I summarize, we had an hour planned for already, the 9th session. We lost 2 hours today, so that's 3 hours. Then we want to add 4 meetings. Ms. Ashton is proposing 2 meetings. That's 4. 4 plus 2.5 is 6.5. Can we agree on 7 hours? Or worst comes to worst, 6.5 hours. Does that comply with Ms. Ashton's proposal? No, 2 meetings, 2 hours each. Sorry. Of course, 1 meeting is 2 hours. So 2 hours.
C'est acceptable, Monsieur le Président. C'est que Monsieur Godin propose.
What Mr. Godin is proposing is agreeable. Mr. Beaulieu, a 1064 could have been calculated as being outside the regular meetings, but you decided to do it in the regular meeting. I didn't decide anything. That's how things work. I believe a 1064 meeting can be considered as different from regular meetings and shouldn't be counted as a regular meeting. So there were supposed to be 1.5 meetings left to come to the end of the 8 sessions in the original motion. If we add 2 other meetings, Mr. Godin is proposing 3.5 meetings. Is that it? I proposed 7 hours. My colleague opposite is saying 6.5, but we should check with Ms. Ashton because we're debating her amendment. Unanimously, the committee can do whatever it wants. Ms. Ashton, I fully agree with the 6.5 hours that are being proposed. But we haven't seen the motion. Has it been circulated? Mr. Beaulieu? Well, 4 additional meetings, that's something I can agree to. my main concern is that clause 54 gets to be debated. So I'm not sure. Those are two different topics, Mr. Beaulieu. But because if we plan for 4 meetings, but we don't plan for debate on clause 54, even for the opposition parties that support this, if we don't get to clause 54, we won't be able to debate. So my colleague is right. In my amendment, I mentioned clause 54, but Ms. Ashton only mentions a number of meetings. She doesn't mention clause 54. We'll be able to use Ms. Ashton's sub-amendment to my amendment, and then clause 54 will be in there. The members will be allowed to vote for or against it, but we'll see in that way who is interested in debating section 54. So we're talking about 6.5 additional hours, plus on top of that, debating on clause 54. Is that your proposal? Are there any other comments? Ms. Ashton, your hand is raised? Yes? No? I simply wanted to say that my support was for 6.5 additional hours. When it comes to procedure, I'm not sure how we can go forward when it comes to specific amendments. It is an important amendment, and I think we simply need to add additional time. That's why I made that proposal. Great. Everyone understood Ms. Ashton? And Mr. Godin, they're not talking about the same thing. Let's go to vote.
So we're voting.
Non,
We're voting on Mrs. Ashton's sub-amendment now. Yes, and it's 6.5 hours. And then the vote will be. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Godin. I just want to make sure that you know exactly what it's about. Just give me a second. So the sub-amendment should be dealt with. So Mrs. Ashton is talking about 6.5 hours, period, right? Oh, we didn't see the sub-amendment.
La motion.
Monsieur le Président,
La motion de M. Godin.
you have it?
Peut-être que
I
Mme
don't have the
Ashton peut
hours.
juste le lire. Comme
It's two
comment
different
elle
things.
remplacerait le 6.5.
OK, mais on n'aura pas le temps. Fois journée.
We need to adjourn. We won't have time to deal with it.
Madame Ashton, on...
Mrs. Ashton, could you please look at Mr. Godin's sub-amendment and see how you want to present your sub-amendment so it's clear for everyone? Well, what I proposed is to add 6.5 hours of meetings because we are not in agreement with 4 full hours. So that's what I was proposing. Thank you, Mrs. Ashton. Mr. Godin, go ahead. Well, in fact, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask my colleague, Mrs. Ashton, if she could, and I'm not sure if it's possible, if we could modify our amendment so it's 6.5 hours. And at the end of the 6.5 hours, we will debate Section 54. And then it should work. Well, it's past 5:30, so should we go for an extra 2 minutes? I need unanimous consent. So 2 extra minutes, and then we'll adjourn. So we have a sub-amendment from Mrs. Ashton. We have to start there and then go from there. So Mrs. Ashton is proposing the following, and correct me if I'm wrong. Mrs. Ashton is proposing adding 6.5 hours to debate all the clauses, period. So if I understood Mrs. Ashton,
we will not discuss Section 54. Is that right, Mrs. Ashton? Yes. What is important to me is adding hours. Yes, Mr. Beaulieu. So we're voting on a sub-amendment of Mr. Gaudin's amendment. If Mr. Gaudin's amendment says that we have to deal with Section 54, then we can vote on this, right? Yes, but Mrs. Ashton's sub-amendment is not taking that into account and does not include Section 54. In fact, Mr. Gaudin's motion is corrected by Mrs. Ashton's sub-amendment. Okay? So we're calling the vote. Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Oui.
Monsieur Drouin.
Oui.
Monsieur Iacono. Madame Kayabaga.
Pour.
Madame Latanzio. Monsieur Godin.
Avant de voter, là.
Madam Clerk, before I vote, I just want to make sure. We haven't even seen the motion. Mr. Chair, I would like to cancel the vote, and I would like to see the sub-amendment. We don't have it in writing. Mrs. Ashton, could you send us your sub-amendment, please? She's doing this right now. So we'll take a short... We are continuing, okay? And I'm sorry for this, but the process, the voting process started, so we have to finish it. And I indicated clearly, Mr. Gaudin, what we are voting on, and I said it was 6.5 hours as suggested by Mrs. Ashton, and we are not including the study of Section 54, okay? So this part of your motion is gone, right? So we're not going to be dealing with this. That's what I explained. And here we can present motions like this. So the vote was called, and we will finish the voting process. That's what Mrs. Ashton said she was proposing as a sub-amendment. We're not adding Section 54. We're just talking about 6.5 hours of additional meetings. That's what I explained. But it changes the meaning of her motion, yes? We continue with the vote.
Contre Madame la greffière, je trouve ça bien malheureux, mais...
Madam Clerk, I find this very unfortunate, but I'm voting against. And Mrs. Ashton, it's not personal.
Contre.
Monsieur Lehoux. Monsieur Beaulieu. Madame Ashton.
Pour.
OK. Ça passe, oui.
Donc, 6.
So 6, 4, and 5 against. Oh, sorry, Mr. Serre. I just wanted to ask Madam Clerk to read the motion we are voting on. It's already been done. We just want to make sure. No, she can read it. Just give me a minute. Mr. Beaulieu, just for the members of the committee, we can present motions on the floor. It's permitted. Let's listen to the clerk first. So here's what I understood. That in the study of C13, modifying the Languages Act for French language used in businesses and other, we will study the Act clause by clause for 6.5 additional hours with 2 sessions per week. And then the second part of Mr. Gaudin's motion is not dealt with, so we're not taking that into account. Mr. Beaulieu? So now we've dealt with Mrs. Aston's sub-amendment. I have another motion to propose now. Well, could you please repeat what you're asking? Because we need to adjourn. Well, I have an amendment, a sub-amendment to propose. No, an amendment. No, a motion then. We are on the main motion. I'm talking about Mr. Gaudin's motion as amended. I have a sub-amendment to propose, yes, but we went over time and would like to adjourn. No, we're adjourning, and we'll start where we stopped, right? Yes, exactly. Okay, so we're adjourning.